Hi, Abraham. Good
Hey,
morning. Good morning. Good evening. Abraham's
good
in
afternoon and good
California.
night.
Yeah, good night, wherever it is that you are. So welcome this morning those of you joining us on Truth, Wisdom, and Freedom Conversations. I'm excited and happy to welcome Abraham Heisler here to have a chat about reducing stress and increasing profitability and also productivity through my favorite, breathwork. I love breathwork. And Abraham, he works with leveraging internal ecosystems, right? What's going on inside, and so he's a CEO of Internal Leverage. He's also a mindset and a performance coach who helps entrepreneurs to focus on their clarity and their businesses and to unlock flow states. So yeah, that's a little bit about Abraham, and he's really into these tools that help to support entrepreneurs. And so maybe we can start off first by talking a little bit about breath work, what it entails, and going a little bit into the science. And for those of you who are watching and tuning in, just hit hashtag live or replay wherever it is or whenever it is that you're watching this. And if you have any questions and you'd like to throw out, feel free to interact as well. So, what's breath work?
So breath work is an active breathing technique, and it's gaining a lot of popularity these days. I think a lot of people are familiar with Wim Hof, the ice guy. But what it is it's a breathing technique that you do by actively breathing into your diaphragm, and there's different kind of ways to go about it. And you can use it for improving health, boosting immunity. I like to use it for the psychological benefits of hacking flow state, creating more confidence, clarity, reducing stress and anxiety within minutes, and helping people to really perform on a much higher level. And then, lastly, the deep sort of end, it can be used for pure transformational experiences.
Yeah. Do you have a story that you can share about the journey? What does it look like to someone that's new to breath work?
Well, I'll say this. So I got into yoga and meditation in 1999. And, I've been doing meditation and all sorts of different pranayams and whatnot for many years. And when I first came across breath work about 10 years ago, to be honest, I dismissed it. And I've seen this a lot, a lot of yogis, they dismiss breath work because they think, oh yeah, I do pranayama, no problem, I got this. But when I actually sat down to do breath work for the first time, which was a little over 3 years ago, it was unlike anything I'd I guess practiced or experienced before. I guess I had similar experiences with plant medicine and with just going really deep in normal meditation, but the ability to enter into that non-ordinary state of consciousness in a very short amount of time with just leveraging the breath, the music, and the guidance of the facilitator was incredibly powerful. So if you're a yogi, if you're somebody who's done a lot of pranayama, and you haven't tried breath work, then this is something that's different.
Yeah. And yeah, some of the subtle differences between pranayama and also breath work is that it's the aspect of control, because there is a rhythm almost when you start in breath work, right? There is this structure around it, but then eventually that structure dissolves when the floodgates open and the emotions come, and then the whole psycho-spiritual experience starts to happen. Whereas in yogic breathwork, traditional yogic breathwork, it's quite controlled with numbers and counting and ratios of breath hold retentions. And so that structure sometimes becomes a little bit limiting in diving deeper into your exploration of what's happening energetically.
Sure.
So do you have some examples of like the cathartic experiences that have helped you personally, or perhaps helped other people through breath work?
I have tons. I mean, I love bringing this modality, which I learned in a setting that was really for spiritual experiences, right? And I think breathwork has been used for many years for psycho-spiritual revelations. And taking that technology and bringing it into a business setting, bringing it as a tool into the entrepreneurial world has been fascinating to say the least. I've had people walk into a breathwork session expecting just like a relaxation session or a mindfulness meditation, and they end up having a life-changing experience. I mean, I've literally had entrepreneurs tell me that they've experienced 10 years of psychotherapy in that 1 hour of breathing with me.
And that's amazing because we have this idea that we want to reduce stress, and that's the symptom that's showing up, but yet there's all of this other stuff that we don't know, and that comes up, and those are the roadblocks that come up, and that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about using breath work. You talked a little bit about using breath work to help people reduce stress. So how does that connect then to profitability and productivity?
That's a great question. Yeah. So a couple of things. One is, if you look at the science of what's happening in breath work, we're breathing in the body in an active way that's oxygenating the body and has a very specific, unique effect on the human brain. So, our neocortex is responsible for thinking and rationalizing and coming up with decisions and having a sense of self and so on and so forth. I mean, we need our neocortex to move through the world. However, what's going on in a lot of modern day situations, especially with many business professionals, is an overactive neocortex, or more specifically, prefrontal cortex. So what that means is that we get lost in analysis paralysis. We experience brain fog. We procrastinate. We give into the inner self-criticism that we hear going on in the back of the mind. All these types of things, which are really, they're business killers, right? If you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to make it, and the responsibility is on your shoulders, and you're constantly procrastinating, constantly, listening to that inner self-critic, you're not going to be able to show up and perform at your best and really tap your true potential, right? So a big part of implementing the breath work is, what the breath work does is it hacks that flow state, which is what is known in technical terms as transient hypofrontality, which essentially means that prefrontal cortex just takes a break. It no longer has to work so hard, and you're accessing the limbic system. You're accessing a different part of your brain that really has more to do with your unconscious mind. And so the end result of that is that when you finally confront the feelings, the thoughts, the emotions, everything that you're bottling down, you're confronting, and you're doing in this way that's clearing everything out. It's like an ayahuasca experience. You're purging, and it can be very uncomfortable and very confrontational, but at the other end of it, there's an incredible amount of relief, right? It's like freeing up a lot of space on your hard drive, and then all of a sudden you have that high level of clarity, focus, and ability to create intimacy with others. And naturally, if you're in a business setting and your job is to, let's say, for instance, be in sales, then the greatest quality you can have in a sales conversation is pure presence, right? And so if I'm distracted by my own stuff, then I'm not going to be present. I'm not going to be influential. I'm not going to be able to really be a stand for this person that I'm enrolling into this program. So the reason why breathwork really increases profitability is because when I teach these techniques to entrepreneurs and they practice it consistently, or they experience a deep dive session with me, the result is that they have much more clarity, focus, and certainty in order to really level up in their business, and especially when it comes to sales conversations, be able to increase their closing rate, if you want to use an industry term.
Sure. Yeah. It sounds like, as you're speaking, it's really about, this applies for all people, really, if you're an entrepreneur, for sure. And also if you're working in an organization, or if you're leading a community of people, if you're a service provider, or whatever it is that you do, whatever form of leadership that you take to take care of your tribe. And what I'm really hearing is that it's like an onion, right? And then at the core of it, our presence, our awareness, our full potential is the center of this onion. And then everything that we're doing with any sort of spiritual path, and in this particular case, using the tool of breath work to access that state of purity, is that we're unraveling these belief systems, stories, traumas, dramas around the pure flow state. And so what kind of stories do you feel or witness people kind of unpacking And then they realize, oh, wait a minute, I don't need this garbage anymore. This is who I really am. That's affecting their ability to perform.
Well, there's one main story that I see occurring pretty consistently, and then it shows up in 3 different areas. So we'll address the main, and then we'll address the branches, right? So the main story is the story of permission versus shame, right? So permission to be who I am, to want what it is that I want, right? Permission to have what it is that I have, and to allow myself to be vulnerable and to be seen, right? And, you know, and again, I speak towards entrepreneurs because I work heavily with entrepreneurs, but you can't be a successful entrepreneur and stay hidden, right? Just the very nature of being successful, it requires you to be visible, to be seen, to be out there, right? And that's very confronting for a lot of people, because a lot of people have shame around being seen, right?
Yeah.
So breathwork, first and foremost, it shuts down that filter, again, that prefrontal cortex that's like constantly, it's like, you know, putting your lipstick on and going out, you know, it's no matter what's happening, it's like you got to put on a face, you got to throw a cap on it, and you got to conform with the norm, right?
Sure.
In order to hide that shame. But when you take that off, and then you're just in this pure essence of who it is that you really are, then it's just like, there's not even a question, right? You're just fully in permission and in the experience of what is really true, which is why it's so powerful.
Yeah.
And not to beat this over that, I'll just tell you one quick experience that I had, not with breath work, but that really speaks to this shame / permission thing. I remember one time I was training with a personal trainer, and I had, you know, knee surgery, and I was, you know, basically he was having me do this step up, which was incredibly difficult for my leg, and I was holding a weight and I was struggling. And as I was doing this exercise, I started grunting. Like, I started getting a little bit frustrated and a little angry, right? And I started letting it out, but I was holding back. I didn't want it, you know, it was like a family establishment. I didn't want to, you know, I didn't want to bother anybody, right?
Right.
And so finally, like, I just reached that point where I said, fuck it, like, enough, right? And I just really just let it out. I just started yelling and screaming like, you know, and I was like Rocky, you know? And what's really interesting is that, of course, everybody stopped what they were doing, and everybody was looking at me like, what's going on here? But in that moment, I had this sort of Satori experience where I was just like, so in the moment. My beast took over, and all of a sudden the exercise that was so hard became easy.
Yeah.
And I realized it wasn't difficult because I was holding the weight. It was difficult because I was holding the internal weight.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And once I was able to drop that, I was free. I was in permission, and I was able to really have a powerful experience. And everybody was looking at me like, that's weird, but to be honest, like, I want what he's having right now.
Sure, it's raw, it's authentic, and we are so conditioned in modern society to repress our demons, you know, so we keep them shoved, you know, under the carpet, in the closet, whatever, and to embrace the weird part, or the rageful, or the beast inside, and to let that come out and play.
Yeah.
I mean, if we were in a situation where, you know, something heavy fell on us, we need to call on our beast nature, like, in order to survive. And so that is not a part of ourselves that is, you know, to be put away and locked up and chained, right? It is a part of ourselves to embrace when we need it. And in this case, you were in physical stress that you needed the beast to come out and play. And if we're so used to just locking everything up, we have no access to all these wonderful colors of our human experience.
And not only that, but we lose time, energy, and effectiveness because we're spending so much time, energy to preserve an image of ourselves that's presentable to the world.
Yeah.
Right? And that's really the definition of a codependent relationship.
And yeah, for sure, codependent, and we're so afraid of being messy and letting people see us be messy. And this is And what other another thing that came up as you were speaking is stories around money seem to also be something that limit people in how they give permission for themselves to own or to even begin to dream or dare to own what they want to own,
Right.
in a material sense, in an internal abundance sense. So can you speak
Yeah.
a little bit about the money belief system?
Right. Well, so what I was saying before, when I do this breath work and really the mindset coaching, and for me, the breath work is like a big hyper dose of the type of work I do with mindset, but that's just mindset coaching is just kind of drawn out over time, right? Whereas the breath work is a really powerful experience, right? And so the result of this work is this dance between shame and permission. And the way that results in the three different stories is the story of money, the story of sex, and the story of power.
Money, sex, and power.
Sex and power. Yes. Love it. And what you said before about we have this tendency to kind of, take the demons and shove it down, put it underneath the carpet because it's taboo. We don't want to look at it. We want to put on a face and basically as human beings, Freud talks about this with the id and the super ego. We have two drives. We have the drive towards the collective, what's, beneficial for the collective. And that's really like, okay, well, let me be civilized and not just, be an animal, because that's what it means to be a human being. But then again, we also have our animal nature, right? We have our desires, our passions, our wants. And so we have a tendency to, sweep the sort of darker, the more bestial, animalistic nature under the carpet and push it down. And if you look at the way the chakras are set up, the lower chakras, right? The first one, the Muladhara chakra is responsible for security, right? The Kama, Artha, Dhamma, Moksha. It's the security, it's the Artha, it's what it is that you're doing with your life to create a living, right? And also there's, heading towards realization. There's that yin yang thing going on. But that sort of money plays out in that lower chakra, right?
Yeah.
Next, we have the sacral chakra. That's the chakra of sex and reproduction and also creativity. And then power, as you know, because you're a Kung Fu master, power relies in the navel, right? The Manipura, right? That's the Dantian. And so when you look at, especially this is the case in a lot of spiritual circles, although this happens everywhere in society, anywhere you find a nice guy or a good girl, this dynamic is playing out that and I'm a nice guy, so I can use the word we when I'm talking about this population. We have a tendency to come from our chest up, right? We're all about heart and love and these good qualities, good tendencies, and what is holistic and spiritual. But when we're not addressing what's going on beneath the surface or from waist down, then essentially what we're doing is we're emotionally and spiritually bypassing.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? Because these lower tones are also part of the human experience.
Yes.
And so, to really illustrate the way this plays out in life, I'll just say in the majority of my adult life, I got into yoga meditation for a long time. I lived with monks. I lived that lifestyle. I was considering to become a monk full-time. And it's interesting. My relationship with money was never great. I never earned that much. My relationship with sex was terrible. I never had fulfilling relationships or experiences. And when it came to power, I just always had this sort of victim mentality that life was happening to me and why me, and I have bad luck and crap like that, right? I never really could create the success that I wanted to create. I would dabble with something, I'd do it for a little while, it wouldn't work out, and I would just say, oh, it's not meant to be, and I would run off in a storm, right? So that's because I was playing that nice guy role and really coming from chest up and not really going into the deep, dark, cavernous waters, if you will, of the lower chakras.
Yeah. And, as you're speaking, it's really bringing up for me, the big word that is popping up is shadow. We're afraid to look at the shadows of power. We're taught, again, it's these belief systems. We're taught that, you don't want to be too greedy. You don't want to take that. You want to share. So don't tell people what you really want. And this is very interesting when I work with British clients. This is very confronting when they have to tell someone else what it is they feel, because my partner is British, right? Northern Irish, and when you go to a family gathering, nothing that is what they really want to say is not really expressed. It's all
Right.
hidden. It's around.
It's indirect.
Yeah, it's very
That's what we
indirect.
call feminine communication, whereas masculine is much more, this is what I want.
Right. And it's like, oh, those damn Americans are so direct and they're so crass, right? But within all of these, you know, polite societal constructs of how we're supposed to behave, there still is this inability to express from this power place, from the third chakra, what it is that I want. And when we can get really detail about what I want, everything else starts to unfold. And then people are so afraid of having this power. It's like what Marianne Williamson says, you know, it's that they're afraid of the light, you know, the ability to, you know, invite in what it is that they deserve and what it is they want and what they've dreamed of versus, you know, the other things, right? So yeah, that's beautiful. Thanks so much for sharing about, you know, your personal journey. Okay, so
I'll just add one last thing to that. You know, as an entrepreneur, you know, especially heart-centered and spiritual entrepreneurs, we get into entrepreneurialism because we want to create impact.
Yeah.
Right? We want to affect change. The problem is that when we are so afraid of the shadow of having a negative impact, we end up having no impact at all.
Yeah.
And that was the case for most of my life, is that I didn't want to say anything that was going to cause a repercussion back or piss anybody off, right?
Yes.
And so even though I wanted to, like, had all these dreams to change the world, I never really could get anywhere because I never really took a stand. You know, I never really stuck my sword in the ground and said, this is what I believe. I don't care if it pisses some people off.
Yeah.
And if you're really following the law of polarity, you know that anytime you inspire a human being, you're also going to piss a whole bunch of people off as well.
Yes. Yes. And that's such good advice. You know, I was just reflecting back when I got my first terrible review. Like, it was awful review on my book that I released last year from the Windy City Times in Chicago. And I just read it, and it was mean, and it just cut me to the core. And I just sat with that, and it was bringing up all this stuff. But yeah, in order to take a stand, that's more important, and to not allow, you know, the positive and the negative to affect us, because we can get addicted to the positive too. We just want to go for the high, you know, and we can also get really self-deprecating about the negative that comes at us. And it's about staying grounded in the middle way.
100%.
So now that I don't know about how it's happening in California with COVID and what's transitioning now, but for us in Australia, we're seeing, you know, the light at the end of the tunnel. So what do you want people to remember about themselves through breath work, especially at this juncture in what we're dealing with?
I think, you know, anytime you come across a great deal of uncertainty, it forces you to question who you are, right? And again, working with entrepreneurs, I mean, the job of an entrepreneur is to face uncertainty day in, day out. And so utilizing the modalities, you know, a lot of which you teach and espouse, and plus breathwork, meditation, anything that really helps people to not contract and instead expand in the face of adversity, in the face of uncertainty. In fact, breathwork is the perfect metaphor for that, because when you see somebody having a panic attack, what's going on is they're actually breathing very shallow. They're contracting, right? And they're breathing these very shallow, rapid breaths, and they're not getting enough oxygen into the body. And what happens is, when we don't have oxygen in our bodies, we don't feel a sense of security, a sense of safety. So instead of falling victim into that dynamic, we are actually flipping on its head with the breath work, and we're breathing down into our diaphragm. We're taking deep, full breaths, and we're setting a standard that is going to have us expand even in the face of contraction. Even when what's happening all around us speaks a different story, sings a different song, we can still reach into the reality of the story that we want to create, because at the end of the day, we're not victims, we're co-creators. And actually putting in the work, doing breath work and doing any sort of alternative modality that is really true and has you face your stuff, it just forces you to really be, as Marianne Williamson was saying, that beacon of light, right?
Right.
And that whole playing small doesn't serve anybody. So it's all about expansion in the face of contraction, in the face of uncertainty, and not contracting ourselves.
Beautiful. I love that. So is there anything else that you would like to address before we, and I know you have a free gift as well that you would like to offer,
Sure.
and anything else that you would like to close with, anything else that you feel like needs to be revealed and to be expressed? Now's the time.
Just, if you're watching this and you really are a heart-centered entrepreneur, or professional, or a leader, my encouragement is for you to really stick your sword in the ground and really make a stand, right? And not to give in to that prefrontal cortex, which has a tendency to be a bit of a Woody Allen running around and controlling things, right? The neurosis, with all the technological advancements, medical advancements we also have neuroses. It's a product of modernity. And so, again, doing sort of, breath work or any sort of coaching or anything that allows you to get out of your head and get back into your body so that you can really be a presence in this world is going to be incredibly beneficial, not just for you, but for us, the world, because we need your services. So
Sure. Beautiful.
yeah.
Well, thank you. So, and tell us about your free gift.
Yeah, so I have a free guided breathwork practice that you can implement into your routine every morning. It's both an explanation, so it's a mini course that has an explanation of breath work, and it also has an animated guided video to follow along. So that, should I just give the link? Is that okay?
Sure. Yes. It's called breathing techniques it's called breathing techniques to boost immune system and reduce anxiety. And I'll put the link below.
So that might be an older link. So let me just make sure that you have the newer one.
Okay, sure.
Which is really more about creating more focus, clarity, and productivity. And I don't think I mentioned, but there are studies that show, I think, what was it, DARPA, or I can't remember. Oh, no, McKinsey and Company, which is a consultancy firm, they did a 10-year study of executives and observed them in this sort of flow state, this transient hypofrontality flow state, and found from their research that the executives who entered into flow state on a consistent basis were able to be 5 times as productive.
Yeah.
So, if you do the breath work and you're able to unlock that flow state, that means that you can show up on a Monday, do all your work, and that's it. You're done for the week.
That sounds beautiful.
Yeah. And so this is just a very basic breathing exercise to help with that level of productivity, and it can be found at bit.ly, so bit.ly/more focus, but more focus is in capital letters, and it actually matters for some reason to be in all caps. So
great. Well, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and also your gift of breath. So important to remember to breathe. Yeah, thank you so much for spending your evening and my morning talking about this, for sharing.
Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right, take care.
Okay, bye.